I would like to invite the second speaker of opposition, Deputy Leaders of Opposition, Rifki Wicaksono of Oxford.
Trade is not an invasion. It does not involve aggression from one side and resistance from the other, but mutual consent and gratification. Trade does not require force. However, free trade consists simply in letting people buy and sell as they want to buy and sell. It is in fact protection or protectionism that requires force, for it consists in preventing people from doing what they want to do. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a quote that I borrowed from a renowned American economist, Henry George, from the 1890s. And the reason why I am referring to this quote is because nowadays, with the term of trade war being thrown around here and there, it seems as if when countries are engaging in trade with one another, it is as if they are engaging in some kind of war. But in fact, actually it is not, because the very prerequisite of trade in itself is that when you have people who want to buy and sell, no one is forcing the people from one country to buy or sell to the people of another country. So in this case, no one is forcing a sovereign state to trade with any other sovereign trade. If the people feel that it is more beneficial for the producers or for the manufacturers and for the consumers especially to trade with another country, then they will do so. But actually, in fact, it is when you enact protectionism, such as increasing tariffs and quantitative restrictions, that is when you rob them of this choice. Now, as the second speaker from the opposition side, I have two primary rebuttals to offer against two of the major arguments from the proposition side. First concerns the legal aspect, namely that the idea that free trade somehow impinges upon sovereignty because they can be compelled into a court of law, well, not exactly court, but into an arbitration through an ISDS, or in the event that the dispute is at the WTO, then at the WTO dispute settlement body. And the fact that they're being compelled to go into such forum somehow means that their sovereignty is being violated. What I need to enlighten is that when these adjudicative bodies, especially the WTO dispute settlement bodies, enacts a decision, it is not as is legally enforceable as if a court of law of a domestic law. The state is still free and still has the sovereignty to be able to choose how to modify its regulations if it deems necessary to comply with what is being required. And secondly, about the issue of an arbitral award, what we need to understand is that the law exists to be able to protect the parties. And investment in itself is actually necessary for the country to be able to have economic growth. And of course, a company will not invest in a country if it does not have protection. One of the examples is that when you have an FDI or bilateral investment treaty, you have what's called as a non-expropriation clause. This basically means that the state cannot suddenly acquire the property or the assets that have been built by the companies. Now, with respect to the issue, the second argument, with respect to the issue upon the gap between the rich and the developing countries and whether they benefit, I actually would like to quote Oxfam on this. And when they said that, in fact, the one who benefits most from free trade are developing countries, not developed countries. Why? Because number one, goods becomes cheaper. It means that the people are actually able to buy the goods at a lower price, which is what the poor countries need. Second of all, it creates a system that is based on a rules-based system. This is the argument that I will subsequently address in my arguments. Now, what I need to address again as well is to clarify the notion of sovereignty itself. A renowned scholar again from across the Atlantic called Stephen Krasmer from the University of Stanford defines sovereignty into two dimensions, which is the internal sovereignty and external sovereignty. In simple terms, internal sovereignty means that this is the ability of states to be able to regulate the people within its defined territory. Meanwhile, external sovereignty means that it is the authority of states to participate in diplomacy and international relations on equal footing with other states. I contend two arguments. We believe that free trade, number one, does not undermine the internal sovereignty of states, because legally, in fact, they actually provide the state the ability to be able to exercise its regulatory powers to protect its economic and non-economic societal values. The second argument is that FTAs, in fact, not only does it not undermine free trade, not only does it not undermine sovereignty, in fact, it enhances the state's external sovereignty because it strengthens their ability to stand on equal footing with other states. Now, moving on to my first argument regarding how it does not undermine sovereignty because it provides states with regulatory powers to protect their economic and non-economic values. First, I present to you the economic development exceptions that is contained in the GATT. Under Article 24, Paragraph 4, which is referred to as the enabling clause, parties may accord differential and more favorable treatment to developing countries without according to such treatments to other states. The rationale behind this, the GATT goes on to explain, is that the favorable treatment is designed to facilitate and promote trade for developing countries in order for them to develop their economies. This means that legally, ladies and gentlemen, the GATT in itself recognizes that developing countries need a helping hand, and so they are given, in certain circumstances, the ability to be given preferential treatment. In other words, when you are trading with a developing country, a developed country may give lower tariffs to goods that come from developing countries so that it is easier for developing countries to trade. Now, with regards to the more general exception which is contained in Article 20 of the GATT, this reads that nothing in this agreement shall be construed to prevent the adoption or enforcement by any parties of measures, A, necessary to protect public morals, B, necessary to protect human, animal, or plant life or health, D, to secure compliance with law not inconsistent with GATT, and G, relating to the conservation of exhaustible natural resources.
1 minute.
What this exception does is that it allows states to protect the concerns which it has, even when it's not connected to economic values. Now, to close, I would like to end with the last argument, which is how FTAs enhance external sovereignty. When you have the establishment of a rules-based system, this ensures certainty for countries to trade on equal footing. Before the existence of the GATT, the trade system was a free-for-all, power-based, rule of law of the jungle, where the militarily and politically strong can trample upon the weaker ones. The fact that now you can have Indonesia filing a suit against the US, the European
15 seconds.
and wins, it shows that actually, in fact, those developed countries cannot just trample on developing countries as they please because they are bound by law. And this is precisely why we believe that the motion should fall. I think.
1. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Deputy Leaders of Opposition, Mr. Rifki Wicaksono. And now let's go to the third speaker of proposition. Member Government, the President himself. President herself, and Sutanto.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a real debater, but I'm a fighter. I'm a ladies fighter. So, ladies and gentlemen, my Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, member of colleague, and also opponent. Let me, member of opponents, okay, and of course my beloved adjudicators, please win us. So, I would like to touch base on what the second speaker said, that trade is not invasion and it's a mutual consent and gratifications. My answer would be, what are the main goals of British and Dutch colonization? What is the main reason of American revolutions? The answer is trade. So is it colonization is the ending of the trades, Or isn't it another way of a cold economic war called invasions? You know, in the past we have a lot of colonizations, and now we have cold invasions called trade. And I would like to also ask the speakers. You said that FTA benefits less developed countries. Tell me how many brands from less developed countries, such as Indonesia, that are being sold all over the world. Isn't it the brands in the developed countries are being sold all over in the less developed countries? Isn't that called invasions? You said legally FTA recognizes the need to help developing countries. Can you show me evidence? Nigeria, Kenya, Myanmar, Bangladesh has legally recognized FTA. Don't you see that there is a Gini ratio or poorness that, you know, recently I met with the EU negotiator. I said to the EU negotiator, you know, you give GSP, you give FTA to Bangladesh, but they are poorer than poor. So isn't it, is FTA helping the country? Is FTA actually really help the sovereignty of any country of less developed one? So with that notes, I would like to say that, you know, the first leader of opponents said something about FTA guarantees growth. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming from a humble beginning called a city, a very small city called Solo. You know? And Solo, you know, I was brought up in Solo with very less educated compared to more developed city or countries in the world called USP, or Los Angeles for that matter. For me, we cannot always say, I told my Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, we cannot only look at the macro scale of the economy. We have to look at the micro scale of the economy, because the details are important. The details are making sure that we, the nations, our sovereignty is really, really impactful. This is not about free trade. This is about our sovereignty. What is sovereignty? Let me recall what is sovereignty. A nation's sovereignty is defined as its ability, our ability, and our flexibility to issue and adjust policies that serves their people and national interests to the best. And therefore, you know, as a micro-scale economy, I urge from less developed countries, we have huge micro, small, medium enterprises that have less capabilities to scale up, that has huge funding costs compared to those from the developed countries' companies, even though they are the same equivalent SMEs. We need to have a fair treatment instead of a free trade. Because we need to have flexibility, and we need to ensure that the new gen or the next gen of generations of less developed countries actually willing to fight for our country, willing to fight for our countries to grow within our sovereignty, not towards the foreign. So, with that note, I also would like to say to all of you that human capital on the less developed country needs time. It doesn't mean that we are stupid. It doesn't mean that we are dumb, but we need to be more mature. And therefore we need time. Time is what we need to ensure that we have a freedom of speech, to ensure that we have actually a chance to grow without the interventions of foreigners, without the interventions of FTA. Yes, we welcome investment abroad, but we need to have it within our turfs, within our policies, within our sovereignty, not being told what to do and how to do it. Because how to do it and what to do is what they don't know. We know what we have. We know what we could do for the country. I might not be a good speaker, but I'm a good believer of my nation's called less developed country. And for that, I plead to all of you, I plead to you, the opponent, please.
1 minute.
Please ensure that our sovereignty is intact. Let the next gen who comes back from the abroad willing to fight for this country, in fact, rather than being told by less developed nations like us, like this and that. We have the brain, we have the heart, we have the culture, we have the heritage, we have the legacy to ensure that we are having a fair treatment within our country. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ismail Sukanto of USC. I'm glad this is not my school principal. And now the third speaker, opposition, member of opposition, Billy Mambo.
Thank you very much for a very rhetoric, compelling speech. Touchy speech from the speakers from the opposition, who come from not a very small city called Solo. Ladies and gentlemen, until now, the opposition team still unsuccessful in proving the relationship between two dots, the free trade agreements and the sovereignty. And touched by our second speaker, there are two aspects of sovereignty, external and internal. They've been doing really quite well on external sovereignty itself, but they haven't proven to us that internally the free trade will undermine the sovereignty internally. And I'll bring you more into that aspect. And by making a conclusion with an incomplete definition, both external and internal sovereignty, it's a wrong conclusion. It's like saying, because Donald Trump is anti-immigrant, all the USA citizens are anti-immigrant. Or saying that because Theresa May is in favor of Brexit, that means all UK citizens are in favor of Brexit, which is wrong. It's a incomplete definition, and they've been unsuccessful in connecting the dots. And I like that you ask, tell me what brands from least developed countries or developing countries who's known in the world. Let me tell you what, Indonesia used to be least developed countries and now one of the superpower or powerful developing countries. And Indomie is a very well-known brand that was awarded as the hunger saver in Africa. And you've touched also on Bangladesh. Maybe, Miss Ant, when you came here you didn't read the news, or maybe Wikipedia at least, that Bangladesh is no longer least developed countries. It's been in developing countries right now. And because of it fixed the internal situation, internal condition which leads to internal sovereignty, they successfully escaped from the list of the least developed countries. Let me tell you some facts. Just because you've touched on the time, right? Just within 2 years, they have the economic growth of 7.1%, that's in 2016, that's Bangladesh, and reduced unemployment from 6% to 4% just in 1 year. And since they opened up the foreign investments in 2012, Bangladesh now considerably one of the very fast in the growth. And you've also, I think the second speaker also touched on, what about if they don't have anything to offer? Let me tell you, I was in Bangladesh and I was in an internship in Dhaka with Professor Muhammad Yunus. And I saw they have nothing as in natural resources. But Bangladesh is now the highest country which offers the best service in ICT. And based on the World Stats data, they offer the best service of IT. And thanks to the Digital Bangladesh program, which is launched by the government, which opens up foreign investment of IT sector to foreign companies starting from 2 years ago. So one, Bangladesh is not a least developed country, and why? Because they fixed the internal situation which links into internal sovereignty that touched by our second speaker. Let me bring you more to that. What is internal sovereignty? Internal sovereignty is when you've got consent by your people that you are an authoritative government to rule them. Without that consent, you're not a sovereign state as government. And to be able to get the consent, you have to protect the human rights, you have to give them democracy, you have to increase the wealth, you have to empower the women, you have to protect the children, right? Alright, some of you maybe say, but you can use coercive power. Just be pushy, just, using your authoritative dictatorship way of leading to protect your internal sovereignty, which is, I will rebuttal that. Based on the professor, hold on, I forget the name. Alright. Based on the Professor Andrew Haywood, a political scientist from the University of Texas, say that by using coercive power to gain sovereignty, to gain consent from your people, just wait until a couple of years and you will lose your sovereignty. And history proved that. Somalian civil war, Burundi, Uganda, Afghanistan, etc. The dictatorship is not lasting forever. You lose your sovereignty by being very protective. Now the question to what does it have to do with the trade then? What does it have to do with the free trade? Alright. In the free trade, because you've mentioned about not free trade, but fair trade, right? Let me tell you, in the free trade, when they made an agreement, they've got a terms and conditions signed by both countries in that agreement. And that's an opportunity for you as a country to do negotiation. And what kind of negotiation? Negotiation is for you to ensure that the agreement is going to enhance your wealthy of your people, using the value of human rights, and empower the women, giving education for the kids. Let me give you an example. I am an engineer and I am currently working in a gas plant project in the eastern Indonesia called Tanggul project. And we've got investment of $8 billion from multiple countries, thanks to free trade agreement that, SIM that we've got. And since the final investment decision in 2016, we used a principle, terms and conditions by the World Bank called International Finance Corporations, in which we use terms of the human rights and values embedded in the contract that we signed with other countries to invest in the project. Also, we had an agreement to give work opportunities for the local Papuan people to get opportunity to work in the project, and also we allow women to be part of the workforce. We signed the agreement in 2016, and the project has been ongoing for 2 years right now. Now, almost 90% of the workers in the project are from local people, from the uneducated Papuan who were given opportunities to be part of the project, thanks to the terms and conditions signed in the initial of the project. Almost 5% of the workers are female in this male-dominated high-tech construction work. And also we give scholarship for the young Papuans to study, to be able to get opportunity to be also part of this project. So, I have strong evidence to say that internally, using the definition of internal sovereignty, the free trade agreement actually enhances opportunity to increase the wealth, which for the government you will increase your concern of the people, you will enhance your internal sovereignty. And thankfully I live in Indonesia, which I got the opportunity to be living in a very conducive environment. Thank you very much for listening.
Mr. Billy Mamdasa from Oxford. Well done. And the fourth speaker proposition. Mr. Raju Munu San.
You want Harvard? You got Harvard.
Fellow cabinet members, the leaders of opposition and opposition members, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The government today laid out a clear case on why free trade agreements undermine sovereignty. The opposition, on the other hand, has confused between FTA, WTO, and GATT. These are all different things. WTO and GATT is all about most favored nation, removing the status of most favored nation. Free trade agreements is an agreement between two nations or several nations, which is bounded by what is written in that agreement, in that very agreement. Now, let's say what my fellow cabinet members, the Prime Minister, the Deputy, and also the member of the government has laid out here. We argue that free trade agreements have been used by big corporations to bully. Free trade agreement has become the tools, has become the vehicles. So what is that? Are we going back to be colonized? That is what we laid out. That is the example that we gave. We talk about fairness. What we mean by fairness? We are arguing whether this pie, whether we can share the pie in equitable manner, or the stronger becomes stronger and the weak gets exploited. That was the premise. That was something that the opposition failed to understand. Now, let me say, first, we never discuss about growth. Growth is not an issue. Sovereignty is an issue. Are you willing to give up your sovereignty for growth? Again, I want to say an example of Japan and China. Japan and China, they do not have FTA. So why are we bringing an example not relevant to these two? China made numbers of FTAs with other countries, but they did it smartly. They did it after they become strong. China entered WTO in 2001 after they strengthened the foundation. That's how they become a winner. They took advantage. They were not forced to enter. They were smart. Let's move on. We talk about transfer of technology or transfer of knowledge. Does it always happen? Does it come free or does it come at cost? And tell me, what cost are you willing to give to get this transfer of knowledge? Remember this. Free trade concept was comparative advantage. The argument that each country should focus on what it does. Well, that was the argument from centuries ago. When technology and capital cannot flow freely. Today, the world is borderless. So the comparative advantage itself is not a concept anymore. I am sad that my fellow opposition here has brought and quote something from the 1890s. How is it relevant in today's day? We are in 2018. And I want to pick up on this. It was said that no one is forcing to buy. Well, that's the essence of the agreement. What is written in the agreement is going to force you to buy from them. So on the surface, we can say no one is forcing. But in reality, that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, I'll come to that why. Because that's going to answer the opposition, the third speaker from the opposition. The law does protect, that's correct. But who drafts the law? Who is more skilled to draft the law? The developing countries or the developed countries? Who can afford Oxford lawyers? Or Harvard lawyers? become the victim because someone may be the judge, the jury, and the executive. We talk about rule-based system, that FTA is bringing a rule-based system. Aren't we ashamed that somebody else will bring the rule-based system? Shouldn't we be responsible for our own rule-based system? And that's what this government is committing to. We want our own rule-based system that's fair for our citizens, for our people, for our next generation. We talk about SMEs, we talk about jobs. You don't have to go far. A lot of people talk about NAFTA. A lot of examples of NAFTA has brought prosperity, etc., etc. But do we know there's a study that shows Mexico lost 2 million farming jobs during 1993 to 2013. At that same time, Mexico only enjoyed 1.3% annual growth. When the other South American nations, such as Brazil, Peru, and Chile, were enjoying much more spectacular growth. So what has NAFTA done to Mexico? Now, America, United States of America, they indeed have something called Trade Adjustment Assistance. Listen to me. Trade Adjustment Assistance, which is assistance given for the losers of trade. Can less developing countries afford to have this? Or will we go and borrow money for them? Another form of giving up on our sovereignty. My fellow cabinet members. So the point here that I want to bring is, we talk about Bangladesh as an example. Do we realize that Bangladesh did not have wage increase since 2013? And it is only this year, after so much pressure, international pressure, they increased it 50%.
1 minute.
We talk also about terms and agreement. Well, terms and agreement is based on your negotiation skills, which you do not have. The idea here is we cannot sit at the table and face people who are much more experienced and educated and try to be on the same level. Point is, we are not ready. So let me close this by saying that free trade agreement will undermine our own ability to chart the course for our future, for our kids, for our next generation. And this government is not going to be the government that is going to be indebted to the next generation. Our next generation have aspiration. They want to be in digital economy, but FTA must stop them. So, with all those reasons, we, the government, propose. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the government with Mr. Raju Munusami of USC. And now, the last of the Mohicans. The Oxonians rely upon you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the opposition leader, Mr. Rio Haminoto.
Assalamualaikum, Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good evening. Gentlemen of the juries, distinguished guests, Trojans, my fellow Oxonians and Catholics, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to have a glimpse of tonight's motion. There are three magic words: trade, agreement, sovereignty. From the prehistoric time, ancient history, Middle Ages, Industrial Revolution, 19th century up until the era of free trade, the basic definition remains the same: an exchange of goods and services. The second word, agreement, in Latin it is called pactum. It has a basic definition: harmony in opinion, in legally binding arrangement. The third word is sovereignty. In Latin, it is called imperium. This word has a basic meaning as full right and power of a governing body over itself without any interference from outside sources or bodies. So tonight's motion is already a contradiction among itself, because there will be no agreement in the first place if there is interference from outside sources or bodies. And perhaps this is the reason why the government on the other side has elaborated proposition in favor to ours. If the government is opposing the free trade, then it means they are protectionist. And what the government is suggesting, well, let me put it into the extreme metaphor. You all know Ferragamo family in Florence. Supposedly that they want to buy shoes. Of course, they can take one or two shoes from their own factory. But if they want to buy a car, wouldn't it more effective if they go to the dealership and buy one car instead of making a new car factory? What the opposition is suggesting is quite simple. The division of labor, creating a system based on mutual interest and respect of each available resources, either skills or natural resources. This is the motive of trade and the basis of economic interdependence. Now I will tell you the problem of tonight's motion, or the government problem. A free trade agreement is an accord signed by two or more countries to facilitate trade by each other. This kind of agreement focuses on three things. Number one, the reduction of trade barriers, such as quotas and tariff. And the more controversial one, environment regulation and labor requirement. These last two are related to commerce extension, bringing into conflict with sovereignty issues beyond traditional concept of jurisdiction over territorial boundaries. Now the root cause of this discourse is derived from the issue existence of the European Union. European Union is a supranational entity with its own system of government that restricts the sovereignty of its member states. An accumulation of misrepresentative image of the European Union as a free trade agreement have changed the perspective of many who can't distinguish between those two. The media has infiltrated this issue for decades, so it goes beyond its basic concept. So I suspect such infiltration has been embedded in the mind of the government. The truth is, European Union is more than a free trade agreement. European Union is a custom and political union who decides custom union and monetary policies that can easily be seen as limiting national sovereignty. Ladies and gentlemen, free trade opens new freedoms. Opportunity for decent life will come through free trade and by providing new jobs and frontiers of opportunities. When you talk about free trade, then you must encounter a gentleman from Scotland who was born in 1723, whose name was Mr. Adam Smith. Mr. Smith was matriculated at the University of Oxford for a postgraduate study at Balliol College, but he did not graduate from Oxford. Maybe because we're a bit too difficult. Mr. Smith is believed as the father of capitalism and free trade, but he did not write a book about how to get rich. Instead, his primary concern is the poor, about opening access to the poor. And this book is actually a guide on how to go to the next level, either as a person or as a nation. It's not, well, some countries are wealthier than other nations, but it's not because some countries are working harder or having better resources. The answer is, for Mr. Smith and for us, is free trade, a regulated free trade, a trade with morality, a responsible freedom, a calculated free trade. What Mr. Smith lacks, quote unquote, because he did not graduate from Oxford, is that he does not explore that in this kind of situation there will be a winner and loser. I agree with you. And it is through the sovereignty of the state that the government can actually compensate the loser. I agree with you as well that the United States has a very fantastic program called Trade Adjustment Assistance. And this kind of social policy is actually the one that can help to deal with inequality and uneven distribution. Political participation must be given to all citizens of those signatory countries. The ability to influence governmental decisions through the engagement of the government. Participation within the democratic system will allow the public to ensure that this free trade agreement will keep sovereignty within their national borders. Now please allow me to quote from the words of Mr. Adam Smith himself. To feel much for others and little for ourselves, to restrain our selfishness and exercise our benevolent affection.
1 minute.
The perfection of human nature. I move that the gentlemen of the juries and respected audience affirm their strong conviction in the principle of free trade, as it is now more than ever necessary for the advancement of the Republic of Indonesia. For a stronger Indonesia would make a better world. President Sukarno had envisioned sovereignty for Indonesia. Sovereign in politics, independent in regard to its economy, and distinct in its cultural characters. He called this as the Trisakti principle. Now it is our time to fight together as a nation for a just and prosperous Indonesia. Honorable gentlemen of the juries, I humbly ask you to vote against tonight's motion. Thank you.
Yeah, let's give a big round of applause to the debaters. Debaters, you can check at each other, just right here, right in the front. Beautiful. Oh, they're hugging each other. The San Francisco way. Thank you very much. And let's give one more applause to all debaters.